It's the opening day of fishing season, and all of Travis's friends have packed their rods into their trucks and set off. Travis, however, stays at home. He has to look after Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan needs a lot of care. Fertilizing, watering, and constant adjustments to light, temperature, and soil chemistry. As you might have guessed, Travis is not tending to the world's greatest basketball player. His Michael Jordan is a pumpkin with big dreams. For Travis Ginger, pumpkin growing is a fine art. He begins in mid-April, germinating his pumpkins indoors. Soon after, he transfers them to a hoop house in his backyard, within view of his bedroom window to keep an eye on them. His growing apparatus is complex. Grow lights, heating elements, and plenty of measuring and monitoring equipment. A good grower can look at a plant and say, "This is what it needs," he says. Travis is not growing pumpkins for good eating, but rather for size. As spring turns into summer, the pumpkins start packing on the pounds, while Travis fends off pests and hailstorms as best as he can. Eventually, in mid-August, it's ready, and he cuts the vine. He has set his sights on a national competition, but inconveniently, the competition is in California, and he is in Minnesota. So he fits a trailer to his truck, uses a forklift to carefully load up the pumpkin, and sets off across the country. And on August 17th, 2023, Michael Jordan is announced the winner, not just of the competition, but the biggest pumpkin of all time, with a circumference of over 21 feet. The prize money is putting Travis's daughter through college, and as for the pumpkin, it was shipped back across the country to New York, where it was carved into the world's biggest jack-o'-lantern ever. But the seeds were carefully harvested first, so Michael Jordan's progeny will live on. Maybe one will become the new record holder. You're listening to Plant Connection. Life today can feel overwhelming, like we've drifted away from its natural rhythm. This podcast is your space to slow down, breathe, and rediscover the peace and clarity that come from reconnecting with the natural world. I'm your host, Lisa Cutshaw. Let's reconnect, one plant at a time. We all know pumpkins. They're one of the U.S.'s most iconic plants and foods. No Thanksgiving feast would be complete without pumpkin pie, and no Halloween would be complete without jack-o'-lanterns decking out doorsteps. But this plant has had a rocky popularity through the centuries. From its auspicious beginnings as perhaps the earliest domesticated plant, it went through a long period of aversion before finally being embraced as the icon it is today. We will explore this journey, as well as pumpkin's important role in our future, in today's episode. Pumpkin's scientific name is Cucurbita pepo, but it is not the only plant to bear this title. Many different squashes, including acorn squash, patty pan squash, and zucchini, are in fact all the same species as pumpkin. The reason they look so radically different from one another is that over centuries, they have been bred into the different cultivars we recognize. The broader Cucurbitaceae family, say that 3 times fast, contains other well-known food plants, including cucumbers and melons. All of these plants grow long, sprawling vines with fruit often hidden behind large, lobed leaves. It's possible that Cucurbita pepo was the first plant ever to be domesticated. Squash seeds found in a cave in Oaxaca, Mexico, have been dated as between 8,000 and 10,000 years old, and have all the hallmarks of domestication. The pumpkin's wild ancestor was likely a much smaller, harder fruit than what we're used to today. And yes, pumpkins and all squashes are technically fruits, not vegetables. Before humans arrived, pumpkin's ancestors likely grew in habitats created by the churning of the soil by the giant mammals that then populated America, such as giant ground sloths and mastodons. After the first humans settled, these animals were driven to extinction, and likely quite a lot of wild squash species with them. But Cucurbita pepo survived, perhaps because people took an early liking to it. It's possible that the fruits were first utilized as containers. Hollowed-out, dried gourds are effective ways of carrying water and other substances. But soon enough, its edible properties were seized upon, though it would be many centuries before the large, fleshy fruits we know today became a reality. Together with maize and beans, squash became one of the three sisters, the key crops that sustained indigenous peoples across Central and North America for centuries. And it's likely indigenous people that brought pumpkin from more southern climes to eastern and northern USA. The squashes were a staple and highly versatile. They could be roasted, stewed, and dried into a sort of long-living vegetable jerky, good for over the winter. Squash was certainly ubiquitous by the time Europeans arrived. Columbus recorded them on his first voyage, and other explorers observed them from Canada to Florida to the Yucatan. But by the time colonial populations were established, squash was already out of vogue. Cindy Ott is the author of Pumpkin, The Curious History of an American Icon, where she describes pumpkin as a food of last resort for colonial American settlers. Pumpkin eater came to be a derogatory term for poor and ignorant farmers. The rapid urbanization of the Industrial Revolution in the early 19th century marked the start of a change in the pumpkin's fate. While zucchini and other summer squashes were brought into cities for urbanites to find at the market, pumpkin stayed behind. It continued to be grown, but principally for feeding livestock rather than people. However, the pumpkin was not forgotten. Cindy Ott describes how many of these new city dwellers retained a nostalgia for the rural way of life. The pumpkin came to symbolize this pastoral ideal, but for a long time, it remained just that, a symbol, not something to actually buy or eat. That began to change when the American Cookery Cookbook hit the shelves in 1796, which included pumpkin pie as a recipe. The book's popularity in New England led to pumpkin pie becoming synonymous with the region, and it continued to represent the North in the lead-up to the Civil War. Abolitionist women wrote poems and short stories that praised the pumpkin as a symbol of the resilient, moral Northern farmer, as opposed to the slave owners of the South. And the growing popularity of Thanksgiving around the same time created easy associations. Lydia Maria Child's 1844 poem, titled The New England Boy's Song About Thanksgiving Day, ends with the line, "Hurrah for the pumpkin pie." Thanksgiving became a national holiday in 1863 during the Civil War itself, and by then, pumpkin pie's place at the table was well established. Interestingly, there is no record of pumpkin being included in the original Thanksgiving feast, but given that both Pilgrims and Native Americans dined on the crop almost daily, the chances are pretty high. This association between pumpkin and Thanksgiving only grew in the years after. The rise of the car meant that city slickers could head out into the countryside the weekend before the holiday and choose their own pumpkin. This trend likely kept many smallholders in business, saved by pumpkin popularity. And to this day, pumpkin and pumpkin pie remain an icon of America. Now, not gonna lie, pumpkin isn't my favorite food, though the roasted seeds are yummy. I know I'm in the minority here, but I usually scoop out the seeds to make snacks and leave the rest of the pumpkin to use as a decoration. But what about Halloween? The tradition of making lanterns actually started in Celtic cultures on the other side of the Atlantic and is associated with supernatural will-o'-the-wisps, ethereal lights in the marshes that could lead travelers to their doom. Jack-o'-lantern himself derives from an Irish folktale. Stingy Jack was a blacksmith who traps the devil through a cunning trick. Only let him go when the devil promises never to take his soul. When Jack eventually dies, the devil honors the deal and bars him from hell. But his sinful life bars him from entry into heaven as well. So his soul eternally wanders the earth in search of a final resting place, using a burning coal within a carved-out turnip to light the way. The original jack-o'-lanterns were indeed made from turnips. Pumpkins, after all, were not to be found in Europe back then. Eventually, the tradition made it to American settlers, and along with a mishmash of other traditions from various cultures, coalesced into the Halloween we know today. The size, durability, and carvability of the pumpkin made it an obvious choice for the lantern, and these days, including in Europe, the pumpkin has far outstripped the turnip in Halloween popularity. Yet while this tradition should remain treasured, there is an environmentally troubling side to it that I think is worth mentioning. Most people do not eat any of the pumpkins they buy to make jack-o'-lanterns. And I am guilty of this as well. I don't. Once Halloween is over, the pumpkins get thrown in the compost or even the trash. This is a colossal and unnecessary waste of food, and also leads to big methane emissions, which warm the planet. Did you know that with a good robust spoon in hand, you can scrape out a huge amount of edible pumpkin flesh before carving your pumpkin? The walls of a jack-o'-lantern will still keep their shape even when less than an inch thick, and in return for your scraping, you get an amazing fresh ingredient to make any number of pumpkin recipes, be it pie, soup, or even lasagna. So this Halloween season, I'm going to make a change in my own habits and see if I can come up with recipes that I like to use the pumpkin in. It may not be the hero ingredient. I may look for other ways to use it. Or I might challenge myself, try something I haven't had in a while, and see if my tastes have changed. And while we're on the subject of monsters, let's return for a moment to the tale of Travis and his record-breaking giant. How did pumpkins make it onto the giant vegetable scene? Well, we already know that pumpkins are big, and that they pack on the pounds rapidly during peak growing season. Their long history of domestication means it's not so hard to make them bigger through selective breeding, and the seeds can be easily harvested to make ever larger pumpkins. People like Travis are attracted by the challenge of getting the conditions just right to grow the fruit as big as physically possible. It's a way of combining every piece of knowledge we know about these plants, which have been a part of human history for so long, to reach a new extreme. If you want to grow your own pumpkins, it's probably best to start with the regular varieties. Pumpkins are typically pretty easy to grow. In fact, many people find themselves growing them accidentally, often after their jack-o'-lantern is thrown onto the compost heap in November. There are many varieties available, which you can select depending on whether you want pumpkins for cooking, carving, or both, or depending on the site you have available for growing them. Pumpkins like sheltered, spacious, sunny sites with plenty of water and fertile soil. Like Travis, you can start them off indoors in spring, or you can hold fire and plant them outside a little later, after the last frost. They like mulches and compost, perhaps because it mimics the mastodon-churned soils where they evolved. And when the fruits develop, place a little brick or stone underneath them to stop them from rotting. While we're here, I'll take a moment to talk about pumpkins' ecological importance. While their wild ancestor is long gone, they maintain a significant role in the ecosystem. Pumpkins have both male and female flowers, both big, yellow, and lasting just a few hours. They're pollinated by all sorts of bees, the most specialized and important of which is the aptly named squash bee, which only takes pollen from squash plants. Squash bee populations tend to thrive only in areas where squash are grown. Fascinatingly, the male bees court the females within the flowers themselves. The larvae live within the soil close to the plants, so if you have pumpkins in your garden, avoid disturbing the soil too much to ensure the next generation of pollinators makes it to adulthood. This helps out your yields too. Each female flower must be visited several times for its resultant pumpkin to reach its full size. Pumpkins are also an excellent tool for environmental restoration. Industrial activities can contaminate the soil with heavy metals, but pumpkins can reverse this process by absorbing these toxins when growing on the soil. The resultant fruits are too full of toxins to be suitable for consumption, but can be safely disposed of, leaving cleaner soil behind. And a final pro-pumpkin call-out. Their hardiness and drought tolerance makes pumpkins an excellent candidate for water-insecure regions. An enterprise called Pumpkin Plus, which began as a project called Pumpkins Against Poverty, is exporting pumpkins to countries like Qatar, Malaysia, and Singapore to build the capacity of local communities to grow this crop commercially. The team are currently working in Bangladesh, trying to breed adaptable varieties that can tolerate unpredictable flooding. And in Uganda, a different project by the Advocacy Coalition for Sustainable Agriculture is working with farmers to promote pumpkin farming to reduce erosion and improve soil health. So there we go. A short history of the pumpkin, a true powerhouse within human civilization and culture. For me, it's interesting to think that the two main uses of the pumpkin by humans, as food and as a hollowed-out container, both led to its early domestication, and define how it is used in two of America's most iconic celebrations. And while I'm glad that the pumpkin is such an essential part of these traditions, I also hope it can break out of this niche in the future to become part of our diet year-round. All in all, I'm not surprised pumpkin was an early favorite of humans. It deserves to be treasured forever. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to nature with Plant Connection. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to tap subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.